Hello, it's Alex. Welcome to my channel. Thank you so much for joining me for this week's Friday SEWS. I said last week that I've been making a couple of non-clothing items and wondered if anybody was interested in seeing them. I've got a horrible feeling I made it sound far more impressive than it really is. But it's why I'm here in the living room. I thought I would show you those bits. And I have also made a start on the Nicole Shirtdress from Sew Over It, and I could do with some opinions. It's work in progress though. But yes, if you followed me for a while, you might know that a couple of months ago I painted this room this very dark green colour. Normally when I do videos in here, I sit on the other sofa, which is diagonally opposite to me. But I thought I'd go for a change. This is my usual spot when I'm watching TV. It's got all my stuff down there. But yes, one of the things I wanted to do, so we're still kind of, this room hasn't really been finished, as in it's still a little bit bare and there are bits and pieces we still need to do in here. And one of the things I thought I could do was, and I mentioned this, was I wanted to make a new throw. So we've got two sofas in here. Whilst the kids are not here most of the time because they are busy living their best lives at university, and the one who's graduated, when they do come home, which is fairly frequently, I've got two coming home this weekend, the girls and I like to snuggle up under a throw, and the throws that we've had have seen better days. We've got two of them. They're a bit cheap and cheerful, this kind of faux fur thing, and I wanted to make something a little bit more in keeping with these colours. So I decided that I would make a velvet throw, and this is definitely going to be a lot of, here's one I made earlier today. So I went off to Abakhan. I popped into the Liverpool branch while I was taking my son back to uni over Christmas time to see what velvet they had, and I wanted some, oh excuse me, I wanted some jewel-like colours, or colours that were kind of dark and would go with this room. And you sort of get what you're given, you know, you can't specify how big the piece is, so I grabbed some pieces that were colours I liked the look of and kind of went from there. So what I've ended up with is this, which it's a kind of, it's looking potentially a little bit more yellow, I'm not sure, but yeah, it's like an ochre-y colour. And then I had a bit of blue, not as much, so I just put a stripe in of the blue, and then I had some brown, so it kind of goes like that. And then the back, I used this, which I already had and was also from Abakhan, is a linen cotton blend. And I know absolutely nothing about quilting, absolutely nothing. I know very little about any of this kind of stuff. It's not really, soft furnishings and home decorations, not really my bag at all. But what I found was that because I didn't know what I was doing, I thought in a way that was quite freeing, because when I had a little Google and looked for information about how to do these things, it was a bit bamboozling, and yeah, there's like so much of the right way to do things. So I decided to just do what felt right. So what that meant was, I mean, literally I just joined the fabric together. I have got the most ginormous binding at the edges. I mean, I think quilters would probably cry if they saw how huge it is. It's got to be 2 centimetres. And when it came to the filling, and I looked at how much the, the wadding costs, I was quite astonished at how expensive it was. And I was thinking, well, I just don't want to pay £50, £60 for something that was a little bit of an experiment. So I hit upon the clever idea and just bought a duvet. And this came from my local Wilko's, which, for those of you not in the UK, is a bit of a sort of, it's like Woolworths used to be. I think some countries still have Woolworths. You know, it has just a bit of everything in it. and they had a single duvet in there for £7. So I thought, okay, well that will do. And it has done, and it's been a really good workaround, but you can, and because the winters are cold and we're all trying to keep our heating bills down and the temperature has been lower in the house, stumbling over my words, what I'm trying to say is I am in effect sitting here under a duvet at night time. So it's been quite nice. It does mean it's been quite bulky for just, you know, folding it over an edge or anything. It is a great big thing to wrestle with. I didn't have the confidence to do any quilting on my machine. I haven't the faintest idea how you do it. I probably can do it on my machine, as in I probably have the right equipment, but I didn't know how to do it. So I decided I'd just do it by hand, and I just used some embroidery floss, lives on the coffee table here, and one of those huge big needles that I bought around Christmas time when I was making that fabric Christmas tree garland. I'll put a link to those below, and I literally just did a little stitch and little ties every now and then. I kind of worked out, excuse the, what is it, it's an ambulance. Yeah, the downside is I'm nearer to the window, so I do hope that the traffic noise isn't too annoying. Yeah, so I started, you can see it's not the same. So this end was how I started it, and I feel that it's not quilty enough. I wanted it to be more padded, I suppose. Yeah, it was too baggy. So then at this end I've added extra, and I think that that is more effective. So I'm kind of not in a hurry. I just, whenever I fancy adding some more stitches, I sit underneath it and just do another little line, which is why this is all sitting here ready for me to go. And I'm not even 100% sure that this edge is, I do think this looks better at that end than at that end, but I may even do some more. But I like very much how it looks. Now, having said that I don't know how to do any quilting or anything, the only quilt kind of thing I ever made was this, and I probably have shown you this before, but I'll just show it to you again. This paper pieced quilt lives, it's so bright here, this generally lives on our bed, and it took me, I'm just worried about the light, I'll do some close-ups if it's not coming across. This took me a good 2 years to make, and I did it all by hand, and I did it following a video from the Stitch Sisters. One of them, I've forgotten their names now, one of them is very much into quilting, and it was on that video that she talked about how to do the hand ties. So that's how I remembered how to do that, and that's how I did the hand ties on my velvet throw. But this quilt was actually, yeah, as I say, 2 years on and off. I only used scraps from things that I had sewn, and when I look at it, I'm amazed by how much blue there is, because I never sew anything blue anymore, do I? But I was very careful when I made this one to include some other fabrics with other colours, just so that there was contrast. So there's this is another one where I didn't follow the rules, because this, for example, here, this ochre colour is double gauze, and I'm sure you're not supposed to use double gauze on a quilt. I'm sure it's far too fragile. And you think I've got double gauze next to bits that are proper thick cotton. Yeah, so the ochre and some of the paler colours created some contrast, and it works really, really well. I love having it on the bed, and yeah, it's really nice, and one day I'll probably make another one. I still keep all my remnants with that kind of thing in mind. I had a go at knitting socks. There's a very nice lady called Marilla. I'll put her info on Instagram. I got, she is a subscriber, and she's a very, very keen knitter, and I was following her escapades in making socks. I think that was last year or the year before, and that inspired me to have a go at knitting socks, which I did, and then I just found I wasn't really wearing them. I've had a go at crochet, so I'm going to show you slight side move from sewing, but anyway, had a little go at crochet. So do you remember I crocheted a cardigan? I think that was during one of the early lockdowns. I'll be honest, I don't really wear it, but I enjoy the process. So now, more recently, I have been making another throw out of, I've got various of these circular granny squares. Some of it I have started to put together. So I've got this blanket, still very unfinished. Yeah, as you can see, I've only got so far with it. I'm not quite sure how big it's going to be. I'll just keep going till I get bored. But I do find that the crochet can sometimes be a bit tough on my hands. I sometimes find after a while my hands hurt. So I've also been, I've shown you this before, it's my bag from Marilla Walker patterns, which I keep all of these bits in. Yeah, so although I've usually got, there we go, one of these on the go, I've been having a go at knitting as well, and I decided to move on from knitting socks to knitting whole garments, and it hasn't entirely been successful. It's been a very long time since I've done any proper knitting, so I keep having to go to YouTube to learn, University of YouTube, to learn things. I did manage to make one garment, which in my vocabulary I would have called, where is it? Called a tank top, but apparently it's called a slip over these days. And I actually finished it and put it together, and much to my dismay, it's huge on me. I kind of keep thinking that it doesn't really matter and I should wear it, but every time I put it on I find myself taking it off again. Do you see what I mean? It is a bit, it's too big. Do you know, I'm going to pull one of these blinds down. Yeah, hopefully that's helped a bit, but look, it's just a bit too big. So I'm sort of having a go at knitting. I would say it's more adventures in knitting, nothing massively successful. And by the way, yes, I did do a tension square. But ever since I made this, I now cannot just sit still at night time and watch TV. I mean, obviously if I'm reading, that's a whole different thing. But the problem I've got now, since we made the room so much darker, and do not get me wrong, I love it being dark. I know it's not everybody's cup of tea, but we tend to only come in this room at night time. We don't tend to use it during the day. And I don't like to sit in a very bright room at night time. I don't tend to use the big main light. We tend to use side lights, and we quite like candles, so we tend to have the candles. And I know that a lot of people would find it too dark, but we very much like it. We find it really warm and cozy. But since changing it, I have had a bit of a problem with all my crafty things. And I mentioned that when I was talking about my serious lights before, and this bit of the video is in collaboration with serious readers and their serious lights, that I ended up taking my sewing light, and bringing it down here over Christmas. And I seriously missed having it down here because it was just before Christmas that we painted it this dark green. So I now have another one. And the great thing about these lights is that there's so many different options that you can have with them, that this one I got more in keeping with the other things we have in this room, because that light upstairs is black and has the brass bit here, which personally I think would look really nice in this room, but unfortunately a lot of our light switches and things were already in brushed steel. as were a lot of the other lights. So we kind of feel that we've got to carry on with that as the metal in this room. But the great thing with these is you can specify what you want. So this time I didn't need to have the whole 2 head thing, the Gemini light. I've just got the single one, and I just have the brass on the adjustable, and this is like a sort of off-white. But again, it is fabulous. I have got the same, or I want to remind you of the same offer code, which is SR218. They are just brilliant. They really are. And for this sort of thing, for crochet, knitting, if I have any hand sewing to do that I don't need to do in the middle of making something, I tend to leave it for the evening, and because I hate hand sewing, to be honest. So at least I find if you've got something on the TV, it's a bit more distracting for what I feel is a dull job. But they just are brilliant. What I really like about them is that although Dave's at that end of the sofa and I'm here, I can have this one on and it just focuses in on what I'm doing on my lap here. So I've got as much light as I need. I usually have my glasses on because I can't see a thing without them, not for anything close. But yeah, I can just have this on, and you've got levels of light, you know, according to how strong or otherwise you need it. And you have the adjustability with the beam, so you know I can focus in or out according to how much I need. Obviously they are completely adjustable in this way. There is even a height adjustable option, which I didn't feel that I needed this time. But most importantly, what's really good about them is, lost my glasses, is the daylight wavelength technology, because you know I need my glasses for reading, I need them for anything that I'm doing close up, and without that light that you know is as close to daylight as you can possibly get, I'm not going to be able to see to do things like crochet and knitting. For example, the other day, just this week, my wide leg billy pants that I wear all the time since I made them, I decided that, actually it was after last week's video, I decided that they were just a bit too long and slightly dragging on the floor and they needed taking up. That is a classic job that I do not enjoy doing because I wanted it to be a blind hem, but I find it so boring. So I took them up. It's got a really deep hem on it, and I took them up by about another 1.5 centimetres. And I took a photograph, which I'll include, of with and without the light. And without this light, there is no way I would be able to do that, because obviously with a blind hem, you're just picking out a thread from the fabric and making your stitch so that you can't see it right side out. And it made all the difference. So the offer code that I want to remind you of is SR218, and included in that offer is international shipping, so it's not just everybody in the UK, even though they are a UK based company. But not only with these serious lights, the high definition, the classic and the Alex lights, they're the ones that have the daylight wavelength technology, so they're the ones we're looking at really for our kind of needs. And you also get, with that code, you also get a free compact light, which is worth around about £150. And that's the one that I keep in my sewing room. I have mine, it's a desk light, and I have mine next to my comfy chair there, and I use that one when I'm unpicking. Ugh, who likes unpicking? Nobody. So I did just want to remind you of that, because I have found these lights to be absolutely invaluable. I mean, honestly, I'd like to say I like the company so much I bought it, but I'm not a millionaire. But I did like them so much that I had to have another one down here. They are pricey. I know they're pricey, but honestly, they really are worth it. So let me show you my cushions. Right, so I started off just making a fairly standard cushion, right? Brown velvet one side, pink velvet on the other. And I looked at it and I thought, well, that is very, very boring. And I've since had a think about it, and I've decided that what would potentially the zip's blue, doesn't match. What potentially would make all the difference is if I piped. If I had a contrast piping, you know, a third colour along here, it would make a very boring cushion a bit more interesting. But the problem is I'm a bit scared of piping. So if anybody knows any, you know, tips on how to do piping or really good videos here on YouTube, please let me know in the comments. Because I think that could make all the difference to a really boring cushion. So then I made these two, and these two were a bit more successful. So combination of the same, I'm going to move this blind even further down, hold on. Yeah, I think that's better. Right, combination of the same velvet, and then the grey here is fabric that I had in my stash that was supposedly a coating, but I didn't feel it was a very good quality one. As you may or may not be able to see, it's already pilling a little bit, but I thought at least it was a bit more interesting. The back is recycled from the cushions I already had on here. I thought it was okay. The problem is that I didn't know until I started using them that this grey fabric is actually a bit itchy. So you kind of, if you have an arm against it or your face, it's not very pleasant. So slightly looks okay but unsuccessful. And then this one, which was pretty much the same thing, but I went for this kind of patchwork effect. I also made this one, but this is not wildly exciting. This is, I know not everybody's cup of tea, but you know I like these kind of 1950s, 60s fabrics. I bought this from the lovely stall at Macclesfield Market, what's it called? The Treacle Market. Yeah, and this has been in the background in some pictures for a little while. Dave doesn't particularly like this one. I know that because he's not mentioned it, and that's a sign. But anyway, having made these and having mentioned that last week I've been making a few bits for down here, I've had in mind that I wanted to make some really nice cushions. I've got a really nice book that Dave bought me not so long ago, which I think is called Modern Quilts. And I've also seen some images on Instagram where people have made bags using this kind of style. And I thought they look really nice and quite contemporary and a really good way of using up some of those remnants. I have huge amounts of remnants. So this week, that's what I did. I went up there and I went to, you know, where I keep them, and I grabbed things that were the right sort of weight, and I used some velvet, I used some fabric from a coat I made, I used some of the fabric I made recently on my, what is Delano dress, some corduroy, and I spent ages doing sketches of different combinations. I'll insert my dodgy sketches. And I had a lovely time making it, and I even did, you know, a lot of these designs have some stitching. Is it called sashiko, that stitching? I attempted a bit of that with some more of this embroidery floss, and I had a great time. And then I finished the cushion, I put the zip in, you know, I was all very excited, and I hate it. I think it looks awful. Anyway, here is the offending item. Yeah, there it is. I just think, what on earth made me think that a brown on brown on brown cushion would look nice? Ah, dearie me, but doesn't it look boring? In fact, doesn't it look a bit meh? Old-fashioned. Actually, what happened was I went into a bit of a funk, and I decided that I didn't want to do any more, having told myself that because you lovely people in the comments had said yes, you would like to see non-sewing stuff. I actually had in my head that I was going to spend the whole week doing all these wonderful creative things, and then at the first hurdle, so I kind of threw it away in the corner. Thought, oh, well, I'll show you a lot and tell you how much I don't like it. But I have sat here subsequently of an evening And I've decided that where I went wrong is that unlike this, where I made sure I had a bit of contrast and it wasn't all blue on blue on blue, I just went all sludgy brown. And that actually, looking at the images of the bags and the bits and pieces I'd seen, they have much more contrast in the colours. So that's where I think I went wrong, and that's what I need to do. And then, as I said, I'm sitting here looking around the room itself, and I think what I'm going to do is we've put some of Dave's paintings up in here, and they are some of his very, very dark ones. Not this one so much, this is one, you can't see it all, but this is one of my absolute faves, and this has got loads of different colours in it. But the paintings we've put in here are very dark because this room is supposed to be dark, and that's the thinking around it. But the paintings do have a little bit of colour in them. They've got sort of red and orange and a little bit of kind of paler grey, tiny bit of yellow, little bit of white. So I think that's what I need to do. I need to pick the colours that are in the paintings and use those and have more contrast, and then the patchworky style will be more successful. Actually, I spent a good day being sulky about it. But then I decided what I would do is I would get on with the Nicole Shirtdress. That's one of the patterns I showed you last week. The printed pattern came from Fabuloso, I think on Tuesday. So I was able to get on with it, and I need to show it to you. So I'm about halfway through. Collar isn't on yet. It has been stay stitched, so I'm not worried too much about that stretching. Yeah, so the collar isn't on yet. Obviously the sleeves are not on yet. But what I'm going to do in a minute is I'm going to get up and move the camera so that you can see. What I wanted to do was compare where the waistline of this one sits and this one. Back in the day, I used to make quite a lot of sew over it patterns because at that time they were one of the few indie sewing pattern companies out there, or one of the few that I knew of. And I think they had a subscription thing. You paid a certain amount and you got, I don't know, a certain number of patterns or whatever. And I was signed up to that for a while. At that stage, they were definitely more vintage focused. And whilst that wasn't really my bag, they were still quite a change really from the big four, which was pretty much, you know, all the alternative was. But I had forgotten how nicely drafted their patterns are, especially for something like this. This viscose that I showed you last week, once I pre-washed it, it obviously had quite a lot of finish on the fabric, and once I pre-washed it, it has become a lot floatier, and is a lot, it felt thicker before. Is it sizing that's on it? Anyway, another reason to pre-wash. So again, I have that same issue where your side seams are on the bias and you've got a slippery floaty fabric, so you really need to make sure that your notches are all matching beautifully. And I have to say, it is a really nice fabric, a really nice pattern to work with. The only thing I'm finding very, very strange about them is that they give, all the fabric measurements are in metric. All the instructions are in metric, you know, it will say it's a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. But when they give the body measurements, they're only in inches. And I find that really strange because some patterns do only inches, some patterns do only centimetres, some patterns give you both. My favourite ones give you both. But to kind of give it all to you in metric but then only do the body measurements in imperial is very strange, I think. At this point, I haven't overlocked my side seams because I didn't know whether I might be wanting to unpick at this stage. I really like how you put the pockets in as well. I'll do some close-ups, but it's those pockets that sit slightly out. Close-up photographs will make it a bit clearer, but I really like the pockets on it. So let me put it on. Okay, so I've pinned myself in because I haven't done the buttons just yet, and as I said, I haven't got the collar on just yet either, or the sleeves. Now I think this fits really nicely. I didn't attempt, by the way, this Bonkers fabric, I didn't attempt to pattern match it for no other reason really than I had 3 meters of it and the pattern required 3.3, and I looked at it and the lay plan had it with the fabric, you know, just folded over, and I thought, I know I can squeeze it out, but I wasn't sure that I'd be able to squeeze it out and get all the pattern matching, so didn't even attempt to. I think with a fabric like this you can get away with it. I did try to make sure that I didn't have anything, because there are hands on this. I tried not to make sure that to have hands on boobs, but other than that. But yeah, so I really like it very much. I did add about, you're going to see my slippers now, I did add about 15 centimetres to the length, so I managed to do that out of 3 metres, and I'm going to, that will give me the ability to adjust the length and see if I want it a little bit longer than the pattern. But waistline wise, so this I would say is my natural waist, where this is hitting there. Maybe what I should do is put the two, because I did just record me wearing the Armidale. I'll see if I can put them side by side. But yes, so there's not a lot in it. I think the Armidale is hitting there, and I think it actually does fit really nicely. So I'm wondering if I need to bother changing it and raising that waist. On the other hand, I could really do with some opinion, because if you all say that you think it will make the difference, it's not the biggest job in the world, but if it's necessary, now is the time for me to do it. So please let me know in the comments whether you think I need bother or whether actually it's sitting really nicely as it is. I think it's sitting quite nicely. However, the one thing that, I do think the fit is really lovely. I made a size 12, but I did, as usual, have to adjust the waist measurement. So I was a little bit in between 2 sizes between the 12 and the 14 on my waist measurement. I noticed there was only an inch, because the measurements were given in imperial, an inch of ease at the waistline. So I was about an inch out. So I added 0.5 centimetre-ish just to the side seams of the bodice and the skirt, but I left the front placket, the centre front seam, as is. Didn't want to mess with that because that needs to be straight. And I'm pleased with how it's looking. But yeah, so please let me know what you think. I'd really appreciate it, because I could probably get this finished in time for next week. So I've had a funny old week sewing wise this week. It really didn't turn out how I envisaged it. I really thought that I was going to have a really fun week of making all these fantastically creative cushions and doing different patchworky things, and I'd have all sorts of wondrous things to show you, and no, didn't work out like that. But I am really glad that I made a start on this, and maybe sort of cushions and soft furnishings aren't my thing. I don't know. I'll keep exploring. Don't forget that code for the Serious Lights, SR218. They really are worth going and having a look at. That gives you the free shipping internationally, and it gives you the compact light, that fabulous light that's worth £150. There will be links below, of course. Thank you very much, everyone. I will see you next week, hopefully with a completed shirt dress and who knows what. Okay, thanks a lot. Bye bye.